Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, back in 2017, Logicked and I were having counter responses on the issue of slavery in Islam. I was trying to say that Islam actually helped in abolishing slavery by elevating the rights of slaves, being more merciful to them, and encouraging freeing of the slaves, whereas Logic was just ridiculing Islam on this issue. Have a listen.
Harshness can certainly make the conditions of slavery worse, but it has nothing to do why fundamentally slavery is bad in and of itself. You know, at least in the opinion of people who actually give a shit about people. And I have to say that the fact that you don't understand that, and apparently you think slavery is just fine as long as it's not too harsh, is creepy as hell.
So basically, cosmic skeptic Alex asked Richard Dawkins, a prominent atheist, about the issue of George Washington owning slaves and linking this idea to how Richard Dawkins considers great liberal values with the founding fathers of United States. And Richard Dawkins actually defended George Washington by conforming to the idea of good slavery.
I'm interested because when you talk about moral progress, you give the example of the founding fathers in America having owned slaves. I mean, the pinnacles of liberty in liberal theory are also anathema to it in the fact that they abuse that in the most cynical way possible. And you say, when talking of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington particularly, you say we can at least hope that they didn't know the conditions on the slave ships coming from Africa, implying that because we think so morally highly of people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and think they're so rational that if they'd have known what the conditions were really like, then they perhaps would have changed their point. But like in today's society, we do know the conditions of the equivalent. We do know the conditions of animals in factory farms, and that doesn't seem to be doing it. I mean, what do you think it will take?
That's a good point. I mean, in the case of Jefferson and Washington, I don't know much about it, but I presume that although they had slaves, they were probably quite kind to them, whereas the treatment of slaves on the ships was utterly, utterly ghastly, I mean, appalling.
So this shows how atheists don't have any foundations for objective morality.
And yet, you would look for leadership to people who not only thought it was okay, but had slaves themselves. Here's the problem. Essentially nobody, and by I mean nobody, I mean like I've counted I think 3 or 4 people that we know of in world history. People, not 3 or 4 groups, I mean 3 or 4 people that I've counted in world history before the late 1600s who thought that slavery in and of itself was wrong. So whatever religion, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, philosophy, Aristotelian philosophy, Platonic philosophy, Stoic philosophy, etc., whatever philosophy, philosophical system you want, none of these held that slavery was an gross and intrinsic evil in and of itself. So if you were going to apply these 2 principles, that slavery is a gross and intrinsic evil across space and time, and that all slavery is slavery and evil, you would basically be saying that all of humanity's moral and religious heritage prior to the 1600s should just be thrown into the garbage can.